You're winning. You're winning. You are winning with another episode of Epic Understanding. I am your host, Coach Erica Love, and I'm excited to bring to you one of the gentlemen from the Global Positive Masculinity Campaign. I appreciate all of your feedback that you've given me, and you might also remember him from the Men's Mental Health Summit. It was fabulous. But there were so many questions about the things that were said and their perspectives. So tonight, we get to take a closer look at Michael Tross. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hi, Coach. How are you? I'm good.
I'm fantastic as well tonight. I just want you to know that I'm so very thankful that you are hanging out with us tonight and that you're going to share your thoughts and your history as well. So just
Well,
thank you in advance.
I appreciate you having me, and you probably have never interviewed somebody you knew so well and yet knew so little about.
Well, we'll fix that. We'll fix that. How about that?
That works. That
No.
works.
Yes. So I have cheated. I do know you really well. And remarkably, we've shared so many stories, but I think the audience is just going to be so surprised about what they find. As a matter of fact, um, part of what I promoted with you is that never to judge a book by its cover. Okay, that is part of what I promoted you as. So I also shared that you're going to talk about how to navigate adverse childhood experiences. Those go together, but we have to unpack your story in order to figure out how all this works.
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly, all the things that you try in life are not always the best things. So we can talk about some of that. Uh,
Mm,
yeah. It's so I'm not exactly sure where you want to start, but I can start at the beginning if that works.
maybe. Let us start at the tasty, good, and delicious part. That's what Kenny says. Uh, love that you're here, Kenny. But I actually want to start at a place that's going to let everyone know that you are a multifaceted man. It is easy to see by your resume or your CV that you're a very accomplished man, and I love that. I certainly met you in the capacity of leadership, so those things are easy to see from you. What wasn't easy to know about you is that you grew up in kind of a situation that was full of brokenheartedness.
I think
Okay.
that's safe to say. Yes, all the
Yeah.
way around.
All the way around. So, where I actually want to start is at the death of your brother. Okay. And how that came about and what was family life like at that point.
Uh, it was a series of things that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
My father and mother had divorced,
Okay.
and we lived in a house when my father uh, started doing pretty well for himself, and we had moved from near Chicago. We were on the Indiana side, but about 60 miles east of Chicago, and we moved from there to Louisiana, a very different culture. My
Mm-hmm.
father was doing pretty well and designed the house that we were living in. And so it was not particularly inexpensive house. My mother and he split, and that was probably for the best all the way around. But what that meant was that my brother was now in a position because my mother really didn't have any particular earning skills, anything that was going to bring in the kind of money to sustain that kind of house. And so my brother was kind of put in that position. He left school and started working in Texas. But as you can imagine, as a 20-something-year-old, he wasn't really in a position to earn that kind of money either. And so being 20-something in the 70s, he was not unfamiliar with illegal substances. We'll put it that way.
Okay.
And so he, as a means to support the family, in addition to the job that he had, which was in Texas, he started apparently dealing in drugs.
I see.
And as a result of that, something apparently went very wrong. And he was murdered while he was working in Houston, Texas. We did not know where he was for a long time. He was missing for several months. And in fact, the only reason that he was found was because the person who killed him thought somebody else had seen that happen and killed them. And when they found that person and going through that, they discovered my brother. And so there was a period of time for several months when we had no idea, when he was just missing. And my mom was single but dating. Actually, what's still rather peculiar to me is that the police in Houston called my family. I remember this rather vividly. It was at night. It was, dark. And shared that news. And I just remember watching my mother on the phone. Fortunately, the guy she was dating was there, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. But either way, she just turned sheet white, dropped the phone, and just kind of sank to the ground. And so it was a difficult time not knowing what was happening, and then difficult knowing what had happened. So, but he did that because he loved me and because he loved our family, and he clearly would have done whatever it took to make life be as good as it could be. And at the same time, the thing that still gnaws at me is knowing that he died alone and in very horrible circumstances, and that's tough for me.
I'm so sorry about this. He was older than you. About how much older was he than you?
He was 9, 10 years older.
Okay.
My sister was 7 years older than I am. So, yeah.
So, in your mind, did you kind of have him as like your hero a little bit? Is he your hero?
No. That's really interesting too, because it's complicated, as most things are. My brother was a drummer, and for much of my life, actually, I was just talking to my sister about this. For much of my life and hers, what I remember most vividly about my brother was him drumming on my head. And he could give us a pretty rough time. Part of that was because of our family environment. But and I'll say this again. So when Dad left and my brother was home, and yes, our relationship very definitely changed. And so we got closer. I don't know that it was a hero kind of thing, but it was, I think we were more solidly brothers.
Okay.
And more solidly family after that. I think he felt that responsibility more, particularly in the wake of my father's departure. So
he thought maybe he should stop drumming on your head and pulling you close to his heart, maybe.
yeah, he did that. And you know, for the crazy things you remember. So for instance, I remember at that time I was into bowling. And so I wanted to go to this tournament. Now, the truth of the matter is, I'm sure they were struggling just to put dimes together to keep the roof over our head and some food on the table. And yet somehow he managed to make that happen. I don't know how he did it, but it was those kinds of things that in retrospect, I mean, when it happens, you know, you're, 10, 11, 12, and you go, okay, so it happened and that's great. And I get to go to this tournament. But in looking back, I realize, what that actually meant. And just another indication how much he cared. So, yeah, he stays with me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I noticed that you framed the fact that he was dealing drugs in light of supporting the family. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that he never used drugs. I'm sure that he did.
Okay.
But he was not, if you knew him, I'm sure a lot of people get this vision in their head of this, my brother was actually pretty well put together for everything that had happened in our lives. And so it was, in fact, the late 60s, early 70s. And that was what young people were doing. And he was a young person, and he was definitely involved in the atmosphere of the time. But and for all the drumming on my head, he was never a cruel person. He was never an uncaring person. Another quick story to kind of demonstrate that. When I was born, I had a lot of very significant and very profound health issues. And my brother actually went blind for a period of time as a stress reaction to what was happening to me.
Oh my.
And so, yeah, I remember hearing about that several times. So, yeah, it was so, regardless of, as you say, you don't put labels on things. Yeah, I mean, he was a teenager, 20 something, 60s and 70s. He did what most teenagers, 20-year-olds were doing at that time. But again, he was a good person at heart, and I never doubted that.
So was your brother shot or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I noticed that you said that the only reason why you found out who shot him was because of another murder, or someone, he thought someone saw him, or
yeah. And I remember too, my specific memory of a lot of these incidences are pretty, cloudy because I was young. But still, I was old enough to know what was going on. I'm sure there was an effort to keep some of the facts of things from me at the time. And so some things I heard about later. But that part I knew, that was how they had found him. Yeah.
I see. Do you guys still talk about this today? Do you talk about that situation?
I haven't talked about his dying for probably not for a long time. I haven't really talked about that with my sister. We've talked about life a few times, but we haven't talked about that. And I'm not really sure why, although I guess in most respects, that seems, although it was, clearly a huge event in my life, but for him, there was much more to his life than that. And so I guess that's what I've always focused on. Um,
It's the other parts.
yeah, yeah. Interesting story. I haven't really told this probably to more than 2 or 3 people. But my brother loved music. As I said, he was a drummer. He was in drum corps for a long time, which is kind of like a variation of band, but not.
Okay.
Um, and it was very, it had its popularity at the time. And they traveled a lot, but he loved music. He loved all kinds of music, turned me on to a lot of music, turned my sister on to a lot of music. And one of the bands that I got from him was Crosby, Stills and Nash, or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Interestingly, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were playing in St. Louis. I had never seen all 4 of them together. And while we were in the car parking, I had this very definite sense, I felt my brother very clearly. And I was just like, yes, of course, come to the concert with us. Absolutely. Internally, of course.
Okay.
But I felt that all the way through the concert. And I just felt like he was there with me at that moment. And kind of an odd situation. Had not expected that. It was not really particular. I'd seen Crosby, Stills and Nash several times. Never had a similar experience to that. But on this occasion, I did. And so that was... that was a pretty unique experience for me.
So, in October, we're going to talk about, I don't know, paranormal things a little bit. So are you saying that you had a paranormal experience?
I would say so. Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Okay. All right. Kenny's sharing your experience. He loves that band. And
Me too. Absolutely.
that is good. So I'm now want to reflect on your mom because you said she dropped to the floor
Mhm.
when she heard the news.
Mhm.
Did your relationship with her change in it at all at that moment?
Um, that's that. If everything else was complicated, that's very complicated.
Okay.
Because our relationship had run across a lot of different uh, territories and terrains, had taken a lot of interesting twists and turns,
Mhm.
and she's a, she's a complicated person. She's not maybe a complex person, but she is complicated, and so I think um, I think her response to all that was in many ways to kind of withdraw. So um, I don't I don't know that it um, brought us closer.
Mhm.
I think, as with many things, I think she felt a lot of guilt. And as a result of that, I think that that became doubly hard and difficult to bear. And look, the truth of the matter is, um, thank God I've never been in a situation like that, never want to be in a situation like that, would never wish that on any human. And I certainly know that there are a number of people who have faced similar types of situations. And so I can only imagine what that would be like. But from my perspective, and in fact, very recently I've talked with my mom, and she has very little memory, or at least very little memory that she will claim of that period of time. And
You
so,
know,
go ahead.
I asked that question that way because your mom chose to make your brother the man of the house upon your father's absence. And I was wondering what she chose to do with your relationship upon your brother's absence.
I I think that I think there was guilt there too. I think
Mm.
largely her life is defined by various forms of guilt.
Hmm.
And as a result, I think that it complicated our relationship. We had a period of time right after my dad left when uh, we had a pretty good relationship, pretty open relationship, and then things kind of changed with her. She fell into a rather deep depression, um, contemplated suicide on a couple of occasions. Actually, that was not particularly new, but faced that, and as a result of that, kind of found her way into a renewed kind of um, religious approach to life, and that created some barriers. It created some bonds, but it created some barriers as well. And so
How
things,
do how do you know she contemplated suicide?
she told me,
Ah.
um, uh, yeah, this the actually one of the earliest memories that I have. I was talking to my sister about this the other day, but one of the earliest memories that I have was being by her bed as a very young child, kindergarten or younger,
Mm.
um, and her talking about that to us
Hmm.
three kids. Later on, when this happened, um, uh, it was a while after my dad had left, before my brother had passed.
Mm.
And when this particular incident happened, I came home one day. I was probably in fifth grade.
Uh-huh.
She told me that she had spent the afternoon in the dining room with a gun that we had on the table,
Mm.
deciding whether or not she was going to do that. Um, Along with many things that my mom said to me as a child, you kind of look back and go, what were you particularly thinking about in that particular time? Why would you share that particular thing with the child? But that's
Right.
kind of who my mom was. So
Right. I'm thinking, why would she say that to you?
yeah, yeah. And so as a result, you went from a rather kind of permissive environment, if you will, because I guess she was making up for the fact that my dad had left and one thing and another. Uh, and so you go through that phase, and then you come into this phase, and you have that kind of traumatic introduction to this whole thing. And then it's a much more restrictive phase. And so that had an impact on our relationship, and I think continued to until today, honestly.
When you say restrictive, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that things that um, um, things that you know were okay, 6 weeks ago were suddenly not okay anymore. And so things that, I don't know if you look at it as getting away with or just being okay, just, normal boy stuff. But yeah, so a lot of things changed, and just her approach to raising me. So yeah.
Interesting. So was it something like you could stay out, late, or you could bring girls home, or about how old are you? I want to try to get an idea of what kind of mischief you were getting into.
10, 12, fifth grade, fourth, fifth grade through like eighth grade, in that kind of time frame.
Okay. So that's kind of like jumping off the roof stage for no apparent reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was so some people, older people, would probably go, yeah. So that's what boys do. But I had a best friend who I spent quite a bit of time at his house, and he was a big fan of, and introduced me to skinny dipping. And
Oh,
and we happened to have a pool at my house. He had a pool at his house. And so, yes, so things along those lines.
oh my gosh. Look, now I know what kind of mischief you were doing. You were skinny dipping. Oh my gosh. That's actually kind of funny.
Yes, yeah, and relatively harmless as boy mischief goes. So yeah, yeah, but so that was.
Okay. All right. So great. You could skinny dip before, and now this week you can't skinny dip, and no more fun for you. How about that?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. I mean, because uh, at my friend's house, that was allowed. It was actually a very conservative way of putting it. So totally okay there. And for a while, okay at my house. Uh, and if it was just me, uh,
Mhm.
in and around the house was okay too. But after that, not so much.
So it was after your mom attempted suicide that it became an okay. Had nothing to do with your brother, is that right?
Yeah, this was long before my brother, well, not long, but a couple of years before my brother passed. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he was still uh, going to college. And so, yeah, so it was basically just me and mom at home. So,
Okay. So when your brother passed, your mom went into like a depressive state. Is that right?
well, yes, a more depressive state. My mom, like I said, has kind of been racked with guilt for a lot of her life, and so I don't think depression was new to her. She
Hmm.
had other circumstances in her life, which I didn't find out about until significantly later.
Hmm.
But all that kind of, I think, was. I think she carried a lot of that with her, and so that kind of got translated into into the relationships she had with other people. She was, for instance, uh, my brother and I, were pretty okay, but she was very, very hard on my sister.
Mm.
And everybody recognized that. It wasn't like, each of us thought the other one was getting the worst or better end of the deal. My brother and I both agreed that my sister was definitely getting the worst of the deal. She was very hard on her, and I think because she kind of judged herself through my sister. So
Oh
yeah,
wow.
it was tough.
I wonder. Can you give me an example of something that your sister would experience that you wouldn't experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was a constant kind of criticism of who she was, her relationships, what she did. She was told to stay inside and clean up and help her clean up while the boys
Mm,
played or did whatever we were doing. And so, yeah, there was a lot of, um, there wasn't a lot of nurturing woman to woman. There wasn't a lot of, hey, let me tell you some things that, let me share some of the things that happened in my life so I can make your life a little easier. It was like
wow.
your life was tough. And so your life should be tough too. And so
Wow.
you figure that out now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. That was an interesting philosophy. I'll just say that for sure.
It most definitely was. Yeah. And particularly hard for my sister. Absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to move to the relationship with your mom and you once your brother passed away, because I'm trying to understand what the dynamics were at that point. Because, like I said before, when your dad left home, your mom made your brother the man of the house. And for the record, I actually think that's one of the biggest mistakes that women make when it comes to raising a son. You can't put that kind of pressure on them.
Yeah, and I think I certainly have been through phases, and I'm not sure I'm entirely out of them, where I kind of to be blunt, I blame her to some extent for what happened to him because I feel like
Hmm.
if he hadn't been put in that situation, things might have been different.
Well, your mom, this is not going to sound great, but your mom is not the only person who has done that. Women do that. They start treating their son like their man. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, and I agree 100%, and I think that it's not uncommon, and that
Hmm.
is a difficult thing.
Hmm. So, if you were to define your relationship with your mom post your brother's death, how would you define it? What role did she give you in the household?
Um, my role was to fulfill her vision of me.
And what was that?
um, Specifically, I think she wanted me to be a preacher.
Really?
Yes, I'm sure that would have thrilled her to no end.
Well, you're a very good orator, so I could see why she would want that from you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it had nothing to do with my relationship with with spirituality.
Right.
It was only her vision that was valid and that counted. And in fact, I kind of wound up rejecting that as a result of that because
Hmm.
it became very clear to me that the path she was going was decidedly not my path.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, and that was very difficult for her as well, obviously. But yeah, so that created a fair amount of conflict in our life up to and including the present.
Wow. Wow. I'm actually not surprised to hear you say that. I think that is at the root of some of your difficulties with religion.
Yes, and mostly and that's what I should clarify. It's not difficulty with religion.
Okay.
I understand people believe a lot of different things, and what I believe probably doesn't make any more sense to other people than what they believe makes to me. And so I get that. That part is not what I react to. What I react to, and this probably is directly as a result of my relationship with her, is people forcing their view or assuming that their view is the only valid view, and that in the absence of that view, if you don't conform entirely and completely to their perception and their spirituality, then you are, you are completely on the wrong track, going the wrong direction. You're on the highway to hell, and there's nothing for you. And so I got a lot of that.
Wow. Wow. I think right now is a great time for us to take a quick break and take a look at ACEs Matter. They are an organization that really focuses on adverse childhood experiences, and they help adults and children manage those so that, well, they don't create a problem for the rest of our lives. So we'll be back after these messages.
If you have a birthday coming up, or maybe you'd just like to do something for the greater good, please consider starting a personal fundraiser on Facebook and selecting ACEs Matter as your cause. Need a reason? Well, we have 3 just for you. ACEs Matter helps families in need cover the cost of mental health services. ACEs Matter hires local contractors and even stay-at-home parents who need flexible work schedules. We care about humanity, and ACEs Matter provides free training and education to those who've been affected by childhood trauma. It's easy to set up a donation campaign from your Facebook account. From your phone or internet browser, type or search www.facebook.com/fundraisers. Select nonprofit, search for ACEs Matter, type in how much money you'd like to raise, choose an end date, give your fundraiser a catchy title, edit the default description if you'd like, then click Create. Congratulations. Now you can invite your friends, share on your timeline, and raise money for a great cause. For every ACE story told, an ACE can be prevented. 2 heartbeats from our house to yours.
ACEs Matter is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. EIN 85-124-6674.
Welcome back. We are here with Michael Trost to talk about how to manage your ACEs. He is giving us his backstory. So far, we have learned that his brother was murdered in his 20s, and we've talked about his relationship with his mother. At this point, I'm very interested to know about your relationship with your father.
Wow. So yeah, that's again I'm using this word a lot. I feel like too much actually, but it keeps being true. Very complicated. Here's the situation. My father was an alcoholic.
I see.
He was a very intelligent person. When he was younger, he had a surgeon who was very interested in him, and mentoring him and moving him in that direction. He was not able to pursue that because he wound up getting involved with my mom and having kids and a family instead.
Your dad was going to be a surgeon?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was what and you could tell that later on in life because he would build these very, the models of ships with the very intricate rigging and everything. He was very into that, and that was the kind of thing that he did. He was very good with his hands and his mind. But I think that between the relationship with my mom, a lot of situations that happened there, he found his part of his relief in drinking, and so that was a difficult thing. So as a result of that, and he was not a chaste person, and so what I heard a lot about, and what was clear to me even at a pretty young age, Dad would go out and we had a pretty good idea based, again, on things that my mother would tell me. Why would you tell a child this? I don't know. But nonetheless, and then he would come home in, not a particularly good condition. And so as she filled my mind with things about how horrible my father was, it was very easy to believe, because that's what I saw. He left. He wasn't with us. He came home and he was in this, terrible condition. And so it was easy. He was an easy target, and it was easy to manipulate my relationship with him. And as a result, I really wanted nothing whatsoever to do with him, and was actually pretty happy when he left. To give you an idea of this, my first name is Robert. His name was Robert. I wasn't a junior, but I was Little Bob or Bobby for a long time. And I just rejected all that. I started going by my middle name because I just really didn't have anything to do with him. Then, actually, after he left, and of course, this is over a period of many years, I began to realize from one situation to another that he was not, in fact, a horrible person. We were thankfully able to mend those fences. It still wasn't, I think, what either one of us would have wanted, but at least because he was, by that point, he was living in Thailand and Malaysia, and he died very shortly after I got married and had kids. So he never met his grandkids. We exchanged cassette tapes. He would record tapes and send those to me, and letters and pictures. But yeah, but it cost me a lot of years, and it cost me what probably could have been a better relationship. I don't know that my dad was actually cut out to be a father. I don't know that that's really what he wanted for his life. And I think my mother made that more complicated rather than less complicated. And so as a result, I think it was this kind of a downward spiral until he actually got away from that, got healthier for himself, and then we developed a healthier relationship. But then, of course, I'm 20 something, early 20s, 2 kids, and he passes away, and I can't even go to his funeral because he's half a world away. And of course, at that point in life, he's making any money. So yeah, It was tough.
Wow. I'm sorry that happened. And is his remains in the States, or is it in, did you say Thailand or Malaysia? Where did he pass away?
He was in Thailand at the time. He had remarried, but he had worked all in that area, Jakarta and Singapore, and so yeah. So yes, so he's over there.
I see. I noticed that you said that your relationship was manipulated.
Yes.
I think that's a place where we want to, unpack that a bit. Who was responsible for manipulating your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, that really pretty much falls squarely on my mom. My dad didn't do himself any favors, of course, because when he left, I mean, he left. First he went to Arkansas, then he was in California, then he went overseas. And so, I mean, it took me a second to unpack some of that stuff. What I had not realized until, late high school, maybe just after high school, was that I had at least 2 half siblings somewhere that I had never heard about. So interestingly, the other thing that happened was that my grandmother, his mom, used to come and visit us. She and my mom were like oil and water. I mean, they just
Okay.
couldn't take each other. And my grandmother used to say things that, indicated that maybe I wasn't hearing the whole truth, but
Mm.
I was going based on what I saw, which, seemed pretty legit, And then, I found that out. So I began to realize what my grandmother had been talking about. Then we moved to St. Louis. My grandmother was in Indianapolis, so we wound up seeing her a great deal more. And I developed a really good relationship with her. And again, even there, I was not particularly close to her because of the things my mother would say about her, because she was defending my dad. And so it was very complicated, but extremely manipulative on a lot of fronts, and it cost me a lot of relationships, frankly. And so as a result of that, but again, you keep pressing forward. 𝐁𝐞𝐬𝐭 said, "Life finds a way." I think love finds a way. And so between those two things, those two forces, I did manage to reconnect. I got to do what a lot of people don't get to do, which is actually develop those relationships and make something where there wasn't anything before.
What do you think was behind your mother's manipulation? I'll share what I mean. Do you think that she was trying to keep you closer to her? Do you think that she was trying to keep you away from your father in a way to protect you? Or do you think that she was just trying to collect you as an ally?
Most likely the latter. My mom's pattern of relationships pretty much was there were in people and there were out people. If she was talking to my sister, she wasn't talking to me. If she was talking to me, she wasn't talking to my sister. If she was talking to one, grandchild or niece or nephew, she wasn't talking to the other ones. And so it was a constant cycle. And I always knew if she called me that clearly something had gone on in one of the other relationships. Something wasn't going well somewhere else, so it was my turn. And so there was that. I do, again, I mean, I think she did want to hold on to that. I think the biggest part of it was she had a very difficult time watching any of us, but particularly me, because I was the baby, grow up. And so to hold on to me and to hold on to that phase. And in fact, if you ask her right now what she remembers of my life, she will tell you, and I know this because it's what she told me, it was pretty much everything up to the point that my brother died, minus the things that she didn't want to remember. So the permissive things, I don't have any recollection of that. I don't know what you're talking about. But mom, so
Right. That's frustrating. That's frustrating.
yeah, it is. And to kind of bring this full circle to you, so you kind of have an understanding. My mother was adopted, and she never knew who her parents were for sure. There was a lot of speculation, but she never definitively knew. One of my half siblings, who connected with her and with my sister only really just a few years ago, asked her, what about my father? And her response was, I don't remember anything. Now, how do you not remember a relationship where you have a child with someone, bear that child while you're married to someone else, give that child up, but you don't remember anything about that person?
Wait, so who's saying this again? What about my father? Who said that?
My half sibling.
Your half sibling by your mom.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
which apparently took place somewhere between my sister and me, which is why there's a 7-year gap in there, and apparently at least 2 kids. And then, that kind of explains my father's, I would start drinking too, honestly. It's a wonder he stayed, quite frankly. It really is.
So your mom had 2 babies that were not your dad's.
Correct.
And that means your dad was walking around watching her be pregnant twice.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So when I got that, again, pieces had already started falling in place, but then I was like, geez, no wonder I don't know what I would have done.
No. We were talking about the female narcissist, right? Would you describe your mom as a narcissist?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, oh my, that's all. I'm like, oh my God, oh my.
Yeah, and
my mind is going
great, so I have to kind of watch myself. And when pressed, I can have an extremely vicious tongue, and so it took me a long time to realize that I needed to control that. So a lot of times I tell people, if I'm talking, you're okay. But if I go quiet, you should watch out.
Because of what's going on in your mind.
Yeah, because that's when I really know that if I speak, I have the potential to say something really damaging. And I'm sadly very good at that, but it's not something that I'm proud of or take lightly. In fact, I'm more likely to not say anything than to say something in a lot of cases.
So who raised those? Wait, hold on. Were the 2 children by the same man?
I have no idea. Couldn't tell you that. I don't think so.
Oh.
I didn't get that impression.
So who raised those children?
They were apparently given up for adoption because she didn't know anything. The one half sibling that I have some knowledge of and awareness of found her, but could not really put together the rest of the story. And when in a position to fill in that gap, a gap she herself has in her life, she refused. So you go,
Are they girls or boys? The children?
Only know one, and that's a girl.
Okay.
Maybe if it had been a boy, she would have been different. I don't know, but yeah.
Wow. I have to say, I am blown away. But I mean, that piece of information alone, I'm just so confused. I'm so confused.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting for me too. So, and in fact, I was working. This was actually just about maybe 10, 12 years ago. I was working in Arizona, and I thought, I should try to find these people. My whole point in trying to find them is, I know you probably grew up thinking that you missed out on something, but you didn't. You're totally, probably better off.
Consider yourself lucky.
and that's a horrible thing to say, honestly. But I wanted to give them at least that much consolation, where maybe there wasn't any. But in fact, I didn't find any of them. And to be honest, it wasn't like I, put a lot of time, money, or effort into that. I did make some effort because I wasn't really sure how I felt about all that, to be honest. But I did want to deliver that message if possible. And then she got in touch with my mom, and then got in touch, then met my sister. And so they know each other better. I have not yet actually met her in person. So, so that's all pretty recent, actually.
Wow. Wow. Your mom has to be really, well, I don't want to put, I wonder if she's hurting. I wonder how she thinks of it.
She is, and I'll tell you my like I have a right to do this, but my diagnosis is this exactly and consistently. She judges herself and she projects that judgment onto anyone who is close to her. And so what you are feeling and experiencing from her is her judgment on herself. And so there's apparently a lot she feels guilty about. And, the thing about it is, I told her, I said, the things that you probably are judging yourself for in my life, you shouldn't be, because those were actually probably the things you're judging yourself for were the things that were good for me. And the things that you're not judging yourself for are probably the things that I would say you might want to think about that. But yeah, so it's interesting. It's heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because you can't go there with her, because in the end everything gets shut down in the face of religion. She actually told me that in our last. I text message with her. I don't actually talk with her because honestly it's just too painful. But I text message with her from time to time, and she actually told me that I would never have allowed anything that was contrary to the Word of God. Those were pretty much her exact words.
So now she's using religion as a shield.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to acknowledge Kenny here, because he says Mike just tossed a grenade to Erica and casually walked away. I think the audience is feeling that big just it's like, wow, oh my God, everybody's kind of feeling that thought, because it was incredible. So far, there are two siblings that you weren't raised with. And then your dad, did he have siblings? Have other children?
My dad did not have any children out of wedlock that I'm familiar with, that I know about, which is kind of amazing, because he got around pretty good. But not that I'm aware of. Now, he had a brother, and I had cousins, and so yeah, we had that. But yeah, it was so no.
So how do you know that there are two children by your mother? How do you know that there are two?
So wow. How this actually came to my attention was because my grandmother, my mom's mother, so the other grandmother, called my sister and was pretty freaked out. They had apparently tracked that far. And so my grandmother said to my sister in the course of this conversation, something to the effect of, yes, but what if the other one calls? And so that's how my sister figured out that there were at least two. How the rest of the tale unfolded, to be honest with you, a lot of that happened between my sister and my mom, and so yeah, I'm not directly familiar with that, but it's so interesting to me. My mom again was very hard on my sister, but really had no room to talk, if you will. So
Right.
I mean,
Wow.
yeah, it was it was difficult. So,
Mm-mm. Something else.
yeah.
I'm just floored. And so almost we don't necessarily know if there's only would you be surprised if there was a third
Not at
or
all at this point.
no?
No, it wouldn't
No.
surprise me.
Have you
Um,
ever considered doing like an ancestry.com or something like that?
I've thought about it. Yeah, I haven't. So I don't know. I don't know.
Would you want to be close to these, siblings that are out there?
I'm still kind of I'm talking about that. We'd actually talked about getting together. My sister asked me if I would be okay with getting together, and so we're talking about that. And actually, what I want to do first, so what I pretty much said is, I'd like to get to know us again
Um,
before we bring uh, bring our half sibling into this. So, because I mean, it's been a while since we've really connected, and so I'd like to be clearer there and have that kind of sorted out. To answer the person's question, no, the last of these children was born a couple of years before I was born. So I was
mhm.
never aware, and in fact, apparently neither of my brother never said anything about it. He would have been in the best position to have been aware of that.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, my mom talked about a couple of incidents that happened to her while she was working at a mental institution.
Mm.
And I asked my sister once, I said, did you ever consider that maybe she wasn't working there?
Oh, maybe.
So I'm wondering if she didn't kind of disappear for a while, and so they didn't see that. But
Mhm.
until that happened with my grandmother, my sister clearly had no idea. My brother had never mentioned anything to either of us, and I think later in life, had he known something like that, he probably would have told my sister. He probably wouldn't have told me because I was still pretty young when he
Mhm.
died. So, but he probably would have told my sister. But
Right.
but yeah.
Because, it does beg some questions like, was she raped these times? Were
No,
the No, no. Okay.
I can say that definitively.
How do you know that? Why do you say that?
Because in some of the discovery aspect of this, what my sister and my half sister discovered was that there was quite a relationship between her and apparently this gentleman was a DJ in Indianapolis
Oh.
and had asked her to leave my dad and come and raise his kids and bring my brother and sister along, and she apparently refused that, which makes it all the more difficult to believe that she can't remember anything about him. So,
Mm.
but yeah, no, it didn't seem to be that.
So this was quite a hot and heavy affair.
Apparently, yeah, yeah.
So who raised your half sister? Who raised her?
She was adopted. I don't know a lot about that yet because literally a lot of this stuff has just come up over the last 2 years or so. I have
Mhm.
not actually met her yet, and most of
Mhm.
the information that I get actually has come from my sister. So,
Wow.
yeah.
How interesting. How interesting. So no wonder your mom's relationship with your brother was different because he kept her secrets.
Well, maybe he may not have known them, but yeah, he certainly felt. I mean, that's the thing, because he certainly felt a responsibility for the family in the wake of my father's departure.
Well,
And
I'm, it would be hard for him not to notice two pregnancies.
one would think, but again, I would also think, had he known that, had he been conscious of that, particularly as he got older, there would have been um, some differences in how he communicated, both with her, with my dad, and with my sister. So, but I didn't
Hmm.
really see any of that.
I wonder, you know.
He and my dad had a very difficult relationship as well. So,
Oh wow. Hmm. What was that dynamic like?
my dad came out of a very 1940s, 50s, post World War II. He was a vet, and he had a very, this is what men do, and my brother in high school was a bit of a troublemaker, and again, because I think reacting to the tension at home and stuff, he just kind of took that out there.
Hmm.
um, uh, so my dad was very, very hard on him. Like, it's not unlike when I quit Little League football. You'd have thought that I had done something really horrible. Uh,
Hmm.
but damn it, men play football, and you go out there and you don't quit the team and you go play football. But I didn't really want to play football. That wasn't who I was. And I think that was, maybe difficult and a little disappointing for him too. But yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. So interesting. I, I wonder why your brother was mad with your father. What?
I don't know. I think really it had a lot to do with the fact that my dad was drinking a lot, was gone a lot. We moved around a lot. He was hard on my brother. He was hard on my brother like my mom was hard on my sister.
What was your sister's relationship like with your dad?
I, you know, in the growing up period of time, everything was difficult because he spent a lot of time, drunk and fighting with my mom, and they were vicious. I mean, they were physically fighting
Mm.
out in the front yard in one occasion.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and they often said the most vile things to each other. So it was tough for all the way around. But I will say this: during the time of my brother's funeral, my dad stayed with my sister, and so they clearly had patched things up earlier than I and my father did.
Okay. That's good. That's good. You know, we have to have some things that we've learned at this point. What life lessons have you been able to extract from the things that you've shared with us?
So, uh, largely, my way of dealing with this as an adolescent was I turned my emotions off,
Hmm.
and I just decided to quit feeling, pretty much. Um, like I said, you do some things, not all of them are good. And so it took me a while, and I'll be the first one to say I'm not sure I'm entirely there yet, but it's funny because that's a trait that is actually promoted in men. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what makes it particularly dangerous, because when all hell's breaking loose, you as a man have to be the person who's not responding emotionally and who's thinking clear and sees the next move to make and does the right thing and gets things moving back on track. And so in many respects, that, it's a trait we encourage. And that makes it doubly dangerous, because when you shut yourself off from your feelings, well, you don't really shut yourself off from your feelings. You just pack them inside, and you keep packing them, and they keep just getting more and more dense. And that's why you have those moments where you lash out and you can say really, really hurtful things. And so it took me a while to moderate, feeling. And so I know I talk a lot about theater, but and haven't here, which is surprising. But a lot of that emotion found a safe harbor in that process. I release a lot of those feelings, and in a safe environment and in a place where I wouldn't lose control. But interestingly, I'm a competent actor. I'm a really good director, but I'm a competent actor. But what keeps me from being a really good actor is that I'm too emotionally guarded, quite frankly. You have to be capable of being emotionally naked to be a really good actor. And I really can't do that. And I found that out about myself my first attempt at college. I really realized that I was too guarded to let myself do that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I do agree with you that you tend to play things close to the chest. It's an honor and a privilege to get to know you, or to have access to your story this way, because I know so many people, or so many times, that you have just really been quiet about what's going on. And I could always tell. I was like, what are you thinking there? What's going on? I'm sure you can talk about some times where I've, said that kind of thing to you.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, because I weigh my words a lot, particularly when I'm in a leadership position. It's one thing I'm talking now about my own life, but you put me in a position where I'm responsible for what happens to other people. And I'm responsible for what I say to them and how I say it. And, I've had a few missteps here and there, as we all do. But I'm very conscious of the words that I use. Words are important to me. They always have been. And so I'm careful about how I use them. And so I do, and I will choose, typically, if I have the choice, I'll choose being quiet over talking, unless I know I have something relevant to say.
Oh, I just think you try to get out of talking about yourself.
Well, it's hard to argue that, because I've just spent a whole hour talking about myself. But
you know what? This is like this is a gym. This is a gym. Like this is not what you do. You really don't. You do not spend tons of time unpacking your life and your heart for people. So I feel incredibly privileged to have this insight, and so I'm very thankful for it. You started to go down a path that I want to go down, and it is the lessons of manhood. Like, how did all this affect your masculinity and your manhood?
So there's a lot, and some of this is going to seem really silly, I'm sure. So let me kind of, unpack, if you will, a little bit of this. My father's middle name was Ludwig, and my grandmother, his mother's maiden name was Ludwig. And she often noted that we were descended from the Ludwigs who ran Germany for a while. Now, I never really, I never really put much stock in that, frankly, because, really everybody's related to somebody royal, right? Okay.
Okay. Okay.
But some friends, actually coworkers, right after I graduated from my bachelor's, I had some coworkers. They went to Germany, and they went to one of the castles. They brought back this little booklet, and it was about Ludwig, right? I'm looking through this, and there is a painting in this booklet that is the spitting image of my brother.
Oh, really?
The first time I thought, oh my God, we might really be related somehow to this family.
Okay.
But I do think, and again, this is the silly part, so I'll just acknowledge that up front. That it does feel like there's a kind of an inherited leadership something going on.
Okay.
And my dad was a phenomenal leader in his own way. When he, in the height of his, things dissolving with my mother and completely collapsing there, drinking and carousing and all of that, in his work life, he had his business functioning phenomenally, far beyond what anybody had anticipated. And as a result of that, they had a hard time letting him go because he was performing very well, but finally things just got so out of control personally that they just couldn't keep going, and the business kind of fell apart after he left. My brother also in many ways was a natural leader. I think, so I don't know. I don't know if that's, if there's a genetic component to that or not. Maybe not. But I think the big thing is, I made a lot of commitments as a child. Interestingly, I committed that I was never going to be an alcoholic. I committed that I was never going to do to my family what my father had done to me. And that was before I really knew who my father was or everything that had happened. But, and so I committed to a lot of things that, and so part of that process was, in fact, turning off all those emotions. And when you do that, you actually gain leadership creds in our society. And so I found that I could climb up ladders pretty quickly. And I was responsible. I showed up because, again, in reaction to a lot of what I'd seen around me. My mother was completely irresponsible. My dad did not seem responsible. And so I took on this sense of responsibility and this desire to fix things. Which is both a blessing and a curse, because some things are not yours to fix.
Oh, that is an important lesson to learn. I have to say, that is one of the most important lessons that I have learned. Now, I love God. And for me, I feel as if it was the Holy Spirit that taught me this. And it's simply, that is not your business. I am not to be doing the Holy Spirit's job, period. And so that's how I communicated. From your perspective, you communicated as, it's just not yours to fix, but I feel like an impression on me.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you how that played out. So I went to college the first time. I went as a psych major because I thought, boy, I'd really like to do that. I can connect with people, whatever. And then I read the play 𝐓𝐡𝐫𝐞𝐞, and that caused me to ask a very important question. So this is the impact that theater can actually have on a life. And the question it caused me to ask is, who am I to meddle in with somebody else's mind and their experience and their life? Even though I think maybe I'm making them more normal or allowing them to conform better, is that really a good thing? Is that really my right to do that? Might they be better off, and might the world be better off if they didn't conform? Because actually nonconformists, as we know, are responsible for a lot of our advances in one section and another. So that really caused me to rethink my whole career path. I quit psychology and changed my major to theater. But I also found that through theater, I could still impact people's lives the way my life had been impacted, but it would be theirs to choose how they related to that experience, and theirs to choose what they did with that. And that to me seemed more, that seemed more right to me, for lack of a better term.
Wow. So interesting. I still think that you put your thumb on the scale in your, I mean, you've been campus president, you've been executive director of, nursing program. I mean, so you've been in these really tremendous leadership roles. And I've seen you in action, right? So I don't know. I think you put your thumb on the scale, but maybe in a different way.
Maybe, but I'm going to refer to another one of my passions, Harry Potter, who says, people are asking him about all the stuff that's happened to him. And he goes, all that stuff sounds really great and really, cool and brave and interesting, when you're hearing it, secondhand or third hand. But when you're doing it, it's frightening and you're scared and you don't know if you're going to make it to the other side. And so when I talked the other day about insecurity, that's kind of a dual relationship. I think it makes me a better leader, honestly, to be aware that, I'm insecure about some things. But it's also something that our society does not promote you being particularly forthcoming about. If you're insecure, we don't really want to know about that. And so, and frankly, the people who are following you don't want to know about that either. That can be extremely, unsettling. Oh my God, he's not sure. He doesn't know. It could go wrong. But there's always that chance. And I think the leader understands that and weighs as much as he or she can the possibilities, and you pick the best path you can find. But for me, that's why I'm a very collaborative manager, because for me, that is always, let's everybody talk and throw the ideas into the pot. And let's find what are the best solutions, because they're not always mine. And no one person always has the best ideas. No one person is always the right leader for every moment. And so developing leadership in your team so that they can lead when it's appropriate for them to is an extremely important aspect of how I approach things. But again, that comes back, a lot of that comes back to theater, because in theater, when you're putting stuff together, you just have to trust that the set guys are going to do what they're supposed to do. And you have to trust that the costume people are going to do what they're supposed to do, and that it's all going to come together at the right time in the right place. But you don't know that's going to happen. And so, but that's a lot of it. So you recognize the various roles of leadership within something happening, within creating something. And I think that's really important.
I think you're right. And I think it's important that we just acknowledge that doing it afraid, that's a leadership quality.
Again, I think this is from Harry Potter. Um, um, but I know other people have said it too, so I'm not sure where it originated. But the truth of the matter is, the only time you can really be brave is when you're really afraid. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you can't be brave if you're not afraid, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the very definition of it. You're facing whatever it is you're afraid of, and working through it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, if leadership is about bravery, it has to be almost equally about fear.
Absolutely. I think good leaders have to know that if you are knocked down and it doesn't go as planned, your response to getting knocked down is getting up.
Yeah, that's and they say that the people who succeed are the people who get up one more time than they fall down, and that's true, um, but I think you need to make sure you take the time while you're down to figure out what's going on, and sometimes we
Yeah.
rush away from that moment. And that's one thing. If I had any you know social ill that I talk about, it's our desire to oversimplify everything,
Okay.
to forget and to ignore the complexity of human life, of human
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, of human relationships. um, it can't be condensed into a 30-second soundbite. It can't be condensed into a 30-minute sitcom. Um, the issues we're facing as a society right now are complex, and there aren't going to be simple answers. And we have a difficult time facing that. And I think we need leaders who can help us face those complexities honestly, and unpack them for everything they contain, and then make decisions. But that's complicated, and people don't like complicated. They like simple.
Well, you described your mom and your dad as complicated.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing for me to do would have been to continue to hate my father, or accept my father wholeheartedly and reject my mother wholeheartedly, or, those are all simple answers. But I mean, um, I control how we communicate, but I still communicate. I don't have
Right.
to do that. And why do I? Some people might ask, but and sometimes I ask myself that. But the truth of the matter is, because I know, look, I know that that judgment comes from a lifetime of a lot of pain. And I
Mm-hmm.
get that about her, and I feel bad about that for her.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it
Mm-hmm.
were different for her. Um, yeah.
You know, your mom was adopted, and I think that's a key thing to remember about her. Maybe that's where she got some of these strange control issues.
Mhm.
You know, so I think that's a big deal. At the same time, even though we have adverse childhood experiences, I think it's important that we learn how to manage them and not do harm. I don't think your mom learned that lesson.
No, and more importantly, I don't think she recognizes that there is harm. I
Oh,
think
okay.
she thinks in her mind she's doing the right thing to, make things be better, and the rest of everybody just doesn't get that. So, because,
What?
well, yeah, I mean,
I,
I, I'll go,
I'm
back.
going to have to say I refute that. I mean, the two babies, I'm just, I can't agree with that.
Yeah.
There's no way that she thinks that.
It was better for her to have them and give them up and raise us,
Okay.
than to leave her husband, which would have been, maybe not the right thing to do, particularly in the 1950s, 60s. And so, I mean, I do. And we all justify the things that we do. We all do that. And so, but I think hers, especially after she, and I'm going to use the phrase got religion, because I think that's really what it came down to. She got a very interesting brand of religion, but nonetheless, she got religion. And I think after that, it then became her place to decide whether or not what people were doing was going to take them towards heaven or take them towards hell. And if she had any concerns about that, it was her place to let them know which direction they were headed.
I see.
As he dived off the diving board.
Got it. Okay. I'll leave that one there. But at the same time, I feel that you've learned some lessons from your mom, some things to do and things not to do. I think that your parenting style probably is a blend of what not to do that you saw growing up.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
That's probably a better question for my children. And they're both old enough now to speak to that. I know I had my faults. I know I did things that I wish I could take back. But all in all, here's the thing, and here's like the greatest thing about my life right now is I not only love my kids, I like my kids. We enjoy each other's company. We talk to each other, for me, that those are the most important relationships that I have. And I relish those. I wish we lived closer. I wish we were more, in physical proximity. But in terms of connectedness, I feel connected to both of them, and I'm extremely grateful for that. So for whatever mistakes I made, clearly they survived them. They're both very intelligent and caring people, very caring. They're so compassionate in so many ways. And I've said before, and people chide me for it on occasions, but my kids are worth 10 of me, both of them. And I feel proud that I was their parent, that I got to watch them grow up and become the people that they are, because they're both amazing.
That's awesome. Kenny says your mother doesn't know what she doesn't know. I think that's true for any of us. I'm going to say this. I feel as if your mother intentionally doesn't know things she doesn't want to remember.
Yeah, and that's something that my sister and I have both talked about, and that's difficult because as I tried to explain to her in one recent conversation, look, what I'm trying to get across to you is these are the moments when I felt accepted by you for who I am and who I was. And and while you might feel that those things were wrong, you shouldn't have let me do those things. Letting me do them was letting me express myself. And that was really important to who I am and who I became and how I got through life. And when you took that away, that really, that hurt. It's kind of like that thing people say, and which is a really horrible thing. And I really don't agree with this at all, but I've heard people say it, before he sends you to hell, God lets you see heaven, just so you know what you're missing for all of eternity. Just he's that kind of cruel, horrible kind of being, which
Who says that? Who said that?
I've heard that a number of times. This is what's waiting you. You'll get to glimpse heaven, but then you'll be cast into hell for all of eternity, and therefore you'll have to live with what you miss. So there's a kind of sense of that, though. There's a kind of reality to that, which is you have this period of acceptance. You have this period of actually, feeling like you're being seen and for who you are. And then there's this barrier that comes down, and after that you are only seen for the parts of you that fit into her concepts of what makes what she likes about you. So you're in that or you're not in that, and so you're either pleasing her or not pleasing her. And so and that becomes the basis of the relationship, which is unfortunate.
We talk a lot about masculinity, and the world has created this phrase of toxic masculinity. I'm all about positive masculinity. But I would say this manipulation and control can be seen in a female as well. And I would definitely say that your mom has some toxic femininity qualities. There, it's actually very disturbing. It's amazing that you turned out so well. Good, my goodness.
It is, and a lot of that you can attribute to my brother and my sister, and a lot of it you can attribute it to my best friend and his family, who were going through that with me at that time. And so Mom thinks that that's absolutely a horrible period of time in my life and refuses to accept that it even happened. But without that, because all other things, whether people agree or disagree with the way they live their lives, they taught me what a functional family looked like.
Okay. Because I was really curious, how did you heal?
Well, part of it was that. Part of it was realizing that I, that it wasn't me. I wasn't crazy for thinking this was really bizarre and was really extreme. There's a movie called About a Boy, and this boy develops a relationship with a kind of older guy, and this older guy looks at him and just, he's talking about his mother having tried to commit suicide, and just goes, geez, I just can't believe that. And it makes the kid feel better. He thinks he screwed up because he didn't have anything good to say, but he actually made the kid feel better because the kid suddenly realized, hey, it's okay that I feel like this is screwed up, because it is. And so a lot of what they gave to me, and a lot of what my brother and sister gave to me, frankly, was that understanding. No, you know what? This is not normal. We really didn't know what normal was. I had a better understanding because of my friend and his family. But so I got to experience that, and we were, for all intents and purposes, much like brothers. And so I learned a lot of that there. A lot of it I learned, frankly, I went through some very interesting times early on in college, early 20s. I then had my kids, and I learned a lot from that responsibility, from, wanting to not be that, and wanting to be more like, what my friend's family had been like. And so that informed a lot of my decision making. But I mean, you're 20 something, you're a kid, and you've got kids of your own, and a lot of the time you're winging it. And sometimes you screw things up and make mistakes. And I certainly did my fair share of that. But I think both of my kids always knew that I loved them and would do whatever I needed to, whatever I could for them. And not because I had to, but because I genuinely wanted to, because I cared about them. And I think that informs it. It would have been just as easy, I suppose, had I not had those influences. It would have been just as easy to follow my parents' path and just kind of be kind of a complete menace in a, relationship and, kind of a, whatever. But because I could have justified that because, hey, what I grew up with. So that's who I am.
That's true. That's true. I'm proud of you that you never went, this is just what I grew up with. What I've grown to know and love about you is that you're forever on a journey of improvement and understanding, which makes you a perfect guest for Epic Understanding, right?
I don't. I worry about words like perfect, but okay. I'm certainly happy to be here. I'll put it that way, and I'm happy that you're interested, and I hope somebody gets something out of this. But if you get anything, it's that you don't have to be controlled by the circumstances you find yourself in. It takes a conscious choice, and it takes recognizing, what you do want as much as what you don't want. And so, there's a lot of complex things in the world that people have to deal with, some far worse than anything that I've dealt with. And I admire people who have come through those circumstances, but you don't come through unscathed. You don't come through without your scars, and you have to learn to appreciate those instead of being ashamed of them.
So I'm going to call that lesson number 1, is that you can live beyond the circumstances that you were born into. I'll call that lesson number 1. I would like to have either a best practice or a lesson number 2 and 3 before we leave.
This one's personal. If your child is born with special needs or under extreme circumstances, don't refer to them as a miracle baby, especially to them or around them, because it just reinforces, actually, although you're meaning it as a compliment and whatever, it really hits that person, or it hit me, I should say that, it hit me as, welcome to the freak show. And so, so I think about that. What that comes down to is, think about how the other person is going to respond, not just to what you're saying, but to how you're saying it. How we communicate is every bit as important as what we communicate. And I'm very big on that, and I try to be conscious of that. I make mistakes like everyone does, but I think that's lesson number 2. Watch the tales you tell and watch how people respond to them, and make sure that's the response that you intended. And be responsible for that if it isn't, or if it is. But especially if it isn't, take responsibility, do something about it. And I think what I'm learning at this stage in my life, I read a book in high school called Damien by Hermann Hesse. And the central theme of that book is the importance of being true to yourself, even when other people do not like that truth, or when it offends or whatever it might be, but that you have to be true to who you are. And I think that's a lesson I am just really starting to come into. But as I, kind of unwrap my emotional life again, I'm coming to terms with that. And what it allows you to do is set some healthy but important boundaries. It allows you to care less. People say dance like no one's watching, and it allows you to do that. It allows you to express yourself and express yourself honestly. People may not always like what they hear. And again, it doesn't mean go out of your way to offend people, but it does mean that you do have an obligation to be your authentic self. And I think people struggle with that in our society.
Very good. Very good. That is extremely good advice, Mike. Extremely good advice. It has been amazing having you here. I thank you for being so open and honest and really giving us a glimpse into your journey into manhood, really your journey into adulthood. It's not just the fact that you are becoming a man and all of these things poured into you, being a father and a husband and a leader. It's just that you became just a really well-rounded person. And I think that is amazing. It is my honor to have known you.
It's been an extreme pleasure knowing and working with you.
Yes.
And we talked about that a little bit recently. So I take responsibility for that too. But yeah, and the feelings are mutual, that I am extremely appreciative of our relationship and the fact that we can talk about these particular things and in a positive way. And I love the positivity you bring to the world. And I'm extremely glad to be part of this show.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, stick around backstage. I want to chat with you before you leave. But family, our time has come to an end. It is amazing being with you guys and just sharing these stories that I have in my heart and in my life and with my friends and the people that I get to know. I love sharing them with you. It is just so cool to walk through these experiences with you because your presence adds a lot more value to it. And so I just want you to know that and how much I appreciate you. And just for right now, I'm going to say bye-bye for now. You're winning. You're winning. You're winning.